My name is Adrian Moore and I am Professor of Philosophy at the University of Oxford. And in this course of lectures we're going to be considering the infinite as it appears in metaphysics and theology, and we're going to be looking at it in a historical way, looking at how this topic has been understood over the ages. And I want to begin in this very first mini lecture by broaching the fundamental question, what is the infinite? What is it that we're talking about? And if you ask most people to tell you what they understand by the infinite, you're liable to get two quite different answers. One thing that's very likely to happen is that people will appeal to concepts like endlessness, or boundlessness, or limitlessness, and they'll say that what they understand by the infinite is what has those qualities. But another quite different reaction that you might get is that people might start talking about concepts like the absolute, or perfection, or self-sufficiency. And there are these two clusters of concepts that are associated with the infinite, and they're rather different clusters of concepts. The first cluster, endlessness, boundlessness, concepts of that kind, those are the sorts of concepts that people are likely to appeal to if what they have in mind is a mathematical understanding of the infinite or a scientific understanding of the infinite. So mathematicians are interested in the infinite, for example, because they believe that there are infinitely many numbers. The series of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. goes on without end, without limit. Scientists may be interested in the infinite because they may be interested in the question whether space or time are infinite. And again, what they have in mind is the question whether space and time are without limit or without any bounds. The other cluster of concepts that I mentioned at the outset is the cluster of concepts that you're more likely to hear mentioned by theologians or perhaps philosophers. And they're the cluster of concepts that are most likely to be associated with the infinite in connection with God. What do we understand when we talk about God as an infinite being? And what people have in mind is that God is in some way perfect, absolute, completely self-sufficient. Now, there are some fascinating questions about how these concepts are related to each other and why the infinite does subdivide in this way, why we have these two clusters of concepts. Fascinating questions which, although they're fascinating, I won't be pursuing during this course of lectures. What I'm doing at this early stage is flagging that my main concern during these lectures will be with the second cluster of concepts. It won't be exclusively with the second cluster of concepts. We'll be talking a little bit about the mathematical conception as well. But primarily I'm interested in what I'm calling here the metaphysical conception of the infinite, the conception of the infinite that you are more likely to find when people are talking about God and about the divine. And I want to look at the various things that people have had to say about that idea of the infinite, going right back to early Greek thought, 5 centuries before the birth of Christ. One caveat, one important caveat, one thing that I should emphasize is that I shall be exclusively concerned with thinkers in the Western tradition. So I'll be beginning in the next lecture by looking at what early Greek thinkers have said about this, and then later we'll be looking at what medieval thinkers have said about this topic, and later still more recent thinkers. But always thinkers within the Western tradition.